Hello and welcome to Frontrunner Motorsport, and the past weekend saw the final round of the 2023 Formula E Championship. I have my notes right here in my Daddy Shark notebook. It's a present from my son, shut up. Now, very unfortunately, these two races were very different. In the first race at London, a lot happened. In the second race, not so much. But it has been another incredible championship from Formula E. What I have noticed is that a lot of electric motorsport series are really struggling to take off. Rallycross, pretty much dead in the water. You have the pure ETCR series is dead. Electric GT series never got started, and very few other series are taking up full electric as an option. Most are opting for hybrid, and so Formula E really needs to be applauded for its achievements in overcoming this huge obstacle, in that it's an electric motorsport series that is exciting for fans to watch and doesn't seem to be a completely massive waste of time for the manufacturers. No other series has achieved that yet. World Endurance Championship, I think they'll be next, and we have seen success with Dakar for electric cars, but that's not as mainstream as Formula E. This was an incredible couple of races, and we have a new champion, of course, Jake Dennis. Unbelievable achievement. When he was signed by BMW a couple of seasons ago, I thought he was just going to be another Alexander Sims, getting maybe the odd good result, but generally a midfield runner at best. And he has completely blown that out of the water since he started in Formula E, because he is a fantastic driver, and he really deserves to be champion. It could have been a lot closer. He took it in the first race due to events, but when you look back at this season, at the points Nick Cassidy and Mitch Evans especially have lost, they really did have a big chance. The Kiwis have won 8 of the 16 rounds. Evans and Cassidy won 4 races each. That's pretty incredible. You don't really get that very often in Formula E. There's usually a wider spread of drivers, but apart from them winning half the races, you only have Dennis winning 2, I think Wehrlein won 3, and then I think Vern, Gunter and Antonio Felix da Costa won 1 each. So you didn't actually have too many different race winners this year. And I think a lot of the drivers you expect to do well, so many of the former champions are on this grid. The only ones that aren't are Nelson Piquet and Nick de Vries. Sebastian Buemi, Lucas de Grassi, Jean-Eric Verne, Antonio Felix da Costa, still there. Stoffel Van Dorn, he's still racing, but Van Dorn has had the worst title defence since Nelson Piquet, but he was still there. But this was an incredible achievement from Jake Dennis and the Andretti team. I thought Andretti were going to really struggle when BMW left them, and they have exceeded all expectations. But we'll go over the races first. So it was Cassidy and Dennis on the front row. Mitch Evans actually qualified on pole but was penalised, so he was starting in 6th. So our main 2 title contenders were on the front row. Dennis did have a big lead, but it wouldn't take much for Cassidy to overturn him. And the worst happened for Dennis at the start, because Cassidy's teammate Buemi got past, and he slowed up Dennis enough that Cassidy took his first attack mode and still got out in front of him. Behind him, though, was the general Formula E chaos. Van Dorn hit Mortara. There was contact between Frines, Camera and de Grassi. And then another twist in the championship tail, Jake Dennis missed his attack mode. So surely advantage Cassidy. But Cassidy took his second attack mode, and for some reason he hadn't really gained much of an advantage after his first one. But by taking his second one, he let Evans and Buemi through. But he was in third ahead of Jake Dennis. Obviously a dangerous position really for both of them. But Dennis had to take 2 attack modes, Cassidy had done both of his. So there were things in Cassidy's favour. He was also behind Buemi, so you'd think Envision would be straight on that radio saying, right, Buemi, get out of the way, let Cassidy through, slow up Dennis, bring him back to the pack, let's see if we can make something happen. Instead, they let them battle. Cassidy tries to get past Buemi. Don't know if Buemi just didn't see him. He must have seen him, they were around 3 corners, but he just closed the door. Cassidy damaged his front wing, it got stuck under the car, and that was it. Championship over. Envision completely blew it. And if you saw my last episode of Let's Watch Formula E Season 2, De Grassi came up behind Daniel Abt. Daniel Abt got out of the way. That's how you really compete in motorsport as a team. One driver's going for the championship, the other one does a job for him. That's all that needed to happen. And I think Sebastian Buemi made it clear he was not told Cassidy was coming through. He's experienced enough to know that his teammate is behind him and he's going for the Drivers' Championship. He should have moved over. And it hurt their chances in the Team's Championship, although that worked out in their favour in the end. But could have been very different, and Buemi had a very messy weekend. In fact, actually, even in World Endurance Championship, Buemi has been a bit clumsy this year. We had a safety car, which I presume was to pick up the pieces. I haven't written down why, but that's what I'm presuming, to get Cassidy's front wing out of the way. And then not long after that, Sasha Fenestraz had a massive accident. He went over the back of Pascal Wehrlein and just launched into the barrier. Very high-speed crash. Eventually brought out the red flag because the techno barriers were damaged and they need to be repaired. That gave some of the drivers who had a bit of damage a chance to recover, because I think René Rast had damage and Pascal Wehrlein had damage. And so the red flag gave them chances to put the cars back together. Nick Cassidy was already out at this point, which basically meant Jake Dennis was almost champion, because Mitch Evans was leading, and that meant Jake Dennis needed to finish third. So he had Buemi and I think Antonio Felix da Costa in front of him, so he was running in fourth. After the red flag, we had a second pile-up after an accident between Norman Nato and Sebastian Buemi, which again I think was Sebastian Buemi's fault, although probably more 50-50. He didn't give Nato a lot of room and Buemi was struggling. That brought out another red flag because there was a car park, and during this period everything got a bit hazy and the information wasn't necessarily brought across very well, but Antonio Felix da Costa was given a time penalty, and I think Jake Dennis jumped Buemi anyway, but eventually it meant Jake Dennis was second and therefore champion. Mitch Evans won the race, his fourth win of the year, and that brought him back into the fight for second with Cassidy, and that was really what we had going into day 2. But the team's championship was the main interest because we still had 4 teams that could win it. The 2 Jaguar powered teams in Jaguar and Envision, and the 2 Porsche powered teams with Andretti and Porsche. Porsche have been very disappointing this year. They started the year so well. And they've taken 4 wins, and you think that'd be a really good job. In fact, Wehrlein has only not scored at 1 race in Cape Town. So he has been very consistent, but since then, like literally the last 11 races, he's been finishing between 6th and 10th most of the time. I think he's only had a couple of races above that. He won a race in Jakarta, but everything else he's scoring a few points here and there, not a lot, not enough to maintain a title challenge. And I think that would be hugely disappointing for Porsche because they looked so strong at the start of this year. I really thought this could be their year. As it's worked out, it was not. Both Neos were actually in the points in the first race, and this has been Neo's best year for a very long time. And that would have been a great result for them, but Sergio Sette Camara was also disqualified. I think it was for repairs. I think it was just something under the red flag procedure. They didn't follow the rules correctly. So Camara got no points, but Dan Ticktum did score points in both races for Neo, which is fantastic. In fact, Dan Ticktum has had a really good year. And for Neo, a team that have struggled a lot, that is very impressive. So yeah, the first race was a bit messy. There was a safety car, 2 red flags, a lot of accidents, a lot of damage to cars. It felt like end of year stuff. So The final race of the year was a much more sedate affair. In fact, by Formula E standards, it was basically a Sunday drive. And not a lot really happened. But we had, at the start, they were just following the safety car around because the weather was atrocious. Very strange because I live 20 miles from London and it wasn't raining here. So I couldn't really figure out what the weather was doing, and apparently neither could they. But they had like 4 laps behind the safety car when the red flag came out. Scott Elkins, the race director, is, I think, one of the best race directors in motorsport. He seems to be able to make decisions very quickly, and I'm presuming he also has a really good team behind him. But the race direction in Formula E is usually spot on. In fact, I can't really recall a time where I haven't understood the decision the race director has made in Formula E. And for a series that is actually quite complicated with its rules sometimes, that's an astounding achievement. And race directors rarely get fans' appreciation, but I think everyone should appreciate Scott Elkin and his team and what they do, because they nailed this weekend. The last race of the year was tricky, the weather was terrible, and they made every decision correctly. So he pulled a red flag, they sent out the street sweepers, the safety cars going around testing the conditions. They sent the cars back out, it was still too wet, so they red flagged the race again. Then we finally got a start under safety cars. They didn't do a standing start, they did a rolling start. Right decision. And it was interesting watching Cassidy and Evans up the front. And Cassidy took his 4th win of the year, and Envision took their first team's title. Virgin have been near the top of the field for pretty much since the beginning, and since they became Envision, they have become even stronger. But this was really the first year where them winning the team's championship seemed not only a viable option, but the best or the most probable outcome at the final race. So to finally do it after such a long time, it's a really good achievement. And I think Buemi has had one of his best years for a long time, but Nick Cassidy has really been a standout driver for this team. And he really, I think, a driver who has been overlooked by the likes of Formula 1. Right, he should have been a Red Bull driver by now. Can you imagine Max Verstappen and Nick Cassidy in Formula 1? They would leave the field behind, because I do think Nick Cassidy is that good. He is far superior to Sergio Perez, just in terms of outright racing ability. He's not necessarily a race winner, or hasn't been up to this point. Like when he won Super Formula, didn't win many races when he took the title. That actually tends to be the case in Super Formula anyway. But the seasons before this, Nick Cassidy takes a win here and there. I think the big thing for him last year was that he didn't win many races, and that really hurt any kind of title challenge. This year, he's taken 4 wins, could have been champion. Really, he should have won 5 races, because he should have won both of these races in London if Envision had done right by him. But he did bring them the team's championship. Jaguar was second, and I think we know why. And this is possibly why Mitch Evans lost the championship as well. Sam Bird has hit him twice, and Mitch Evans went over Cassidy in Rome. And when you think about how many points they lost and how many points Mitch Evans lost, it's probably enough to cover the gap to the championships. Jaguar really could have done it this year, but they failed. And it was mistakes, unfortunate errors, especially from Sam Bird. And someone experienced as him should not be making those mistakes. But I don't know if that's going to be something they're going to look at next season and say maybe Sam Bird is not the right call. We've not really had too much news on the driver market yet. I think Sebastian Buemi and Jake Dennis are the only drivers signed up for next year so far. I think in terms of the ones who are guaranteed to leave, Andre Lotterer is the only one, because he's a bit of an elder statesman anyway, but he has his World Endurance Championship commitments with Porsche, as does Sebastian Buemi with Toyota. But Andre Lotterer has had a really bad few years. He really struggled with Porsche, and in this Andretti he's had a terrible season. He's had more accidents than points. It's been a long time since he was a top contender in Formula E, and I think it'd be the right time for him to step away. And I think Andretti would benefit from someone else in that car, because they lost his team's championship because only one car was really scoring good points for him. and Jake Dennis had to do that fight alone. And it's a testament to how well he's done. They finished third ahead of Porsche, because Felix da Costa and Wehrlein possibly should have done better, but it seems to be an issue with Porsche as a team, because, as I said, at the start of this year, they looked really good, and they did not continue that form throughout the year, and that really hurt them. Behind that, you had the likes of DS, Penske, and Maserati, Nissan, McLaren. Average years, but I think, especially with the likes of Maserati and possibly DS, Penske as well, they were sort of learning the trade. They were different teams. DS were with Techeetah, who have also obviously had a lot of success over the years, but DS Penske was a new outfit for Formula E. Maserati, they took over the Venturi team, but it was still sort of a new outfit, and they did have DS powertrains, which I don't think Venturi were running, but I don't know what Venturi were running. Well, I think possibly Mercedes, weren't it? But it's been, McLaren have had a tough first year, and again, start of the year they seem to be running very well, but struggled towards the back end, whereas at Cupra were nowhere at the start of the year, and they've come through strong at the end. Didn't score a lot of points, but the performances they're putting in were better, especially Nico Müller. And so, I think next year, as far as I'm aware, it's going to be the same teams. I think a lot of the same drivers will return. I think we will see a few new faces, but it's going to be another interesting year. If Nick Cassidy comes back with Envision, I think he's going to come on stronger and stronger, and he could be the one to pick next year. Mitch Evans has surely got to have a turn in luck at some point, but Jake Dennis defending his title, that's a tough one to bet against as well. So I think 2024 is going to be another fantastic year for Formula E. It sort of casts an interesting shadow over electric motorsport in general. As I said, we've not seen any other series take up this kind of success level. Most of them just die. And I think a lot of them could look at what Formula E does and try and replicate that in other series. Like an electric touring car series that has similar rules to Formula E would probably work, but I guess without the street track layout, the street tracks really do help Formula E. One thing that doesn't, and I still don't like it, and I know a lot of people have disagreed with me in the comments on previous Formula E videos, is I still don't like attack mode. Both of these races, well, I mean, the second race didn't really matter, but the first race, the attack mode thing just, it completely sours the race. It just gets in the way. It's unnecessary. And Jake Dennis missing it twice, it was just annoying. And I don't like it. I honestly don't think it adds anything to Formula E. I think it overcomplicates it. The energy readings are enough, and it doesn't need attack mode. It didn't need fan boost. It's honestly, these little things they add on to try and make it more exciting tend to take away from the actual excitement. And that's my opinion. I may be wrong, but if you disagree with me, obviously you're wrong. And with that, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good one.